All right, let's get going. So first of all, thanks for being with us here this morning, local time here in Boston, Massachusetts in the US. I know many of you are joining us from all over the world, so whether it is good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to you, thanks for being with us here today for this UCM series IP PBX Training Webinar. Over the 1.5 to 2 hours, we will be basically taking you through a full online initial setup training for the UCM series IP PBX. I will basically introduce the devices to you, go through the various models that we offer, kind of some of the things that really stands out about these devices. And then I will turn it over to Ernesto, who will take you through the most of today's webinar. Will actually show you how to set up, manage, provision, etc. the UCM series of IP PBXs using the web user interface. This webinar is being recorded. We will upload it to our YouTube page at the end of probably later today or tomorrow. So if you're looking for a recording, you can just go over and check our YouTube page at any point in time. You can go to YouTube and search Grandstream, or I believe it's youtube.com/Grandstream Networks. So yeah, and you can also find a variety of other recorded training webinars and other webinars, such as our video talks, up there. All right, so as I always start off, this webinar is being brought to you by IP Video Talk. IP Video Talk, for those of you not familiar with it, is our own in-house developed video, audio, and web conferencing platform. It was initially built to pair, basically to offer a plug-and-play cloud platform with our GVC series of video conferencing devices. And since it has been launched, it has been expanded to be a full video, audio, and web conferencing platform. It's one of the few platforms out there that allows you to hold meetings, to hold webinars, to hold video calls, audio calls, etc. In a way that can be supported by web users, hardware video conferencing devices, and mobile users through the Android and the iOS app. So take a look at it, ipvideotalk.com. You can sign up for, at any point in time, you can actually sign up for a free trial. So head on over to ipvideotalk.com to learn more and sign up. Again, you can get your hands on a free trial without having to put down any payment information, test it out, see what you think. It's great if you have a Grandstream GVC series device, but also if you're looking to really take your conferencing and your collaboration with your teams to the next level, this is a great tool to do so. Go on over to ipvideotalk.com to learn more and sign up. All right, so we're here today to talk about our UCM series of IP PBXs. For the next 10 minutes, I will basically just give you a quick introduction into these devices, kind of tell you about them, what stands out from marketing or a sales perspective, and then I'll turn it over to Ernesto for the rest of the webinar. Actually, one thing I mentioned earlier that I wanted to come back, if you do have any questions at any point in time, feel free to shoot them over to us. I would prefer, it's easier for us if you use that question and answer window, which you can find from, you'll see the chat window on the right-hand side at the bottom of the screen. You'll see a little gear, and to the left of that is a queue and a chat bubble. That is the question and answer panel. It just makes it a little bit easier for me to kind of see the questions in the order that they come in and address them as we go. If we do not answer your question when it does come in, we will have a question and answer period at the end. We go through this in a kind of a very methodical fashion. So a lot of the questions that you may have, we're going to answer later on in the webinar, which is why we're not going to answer them. But we will have a question and answer period at the end for anything we can't get to. All right, so let's start off here. The UCM series of IP PBXs has been out on the market. We introduced it in June of 2013, I believe. And over the last 4.5 years, it has grown to become one of the most popular on-premise IP PBXs in the world. It is obviously a full unified communications manager, hence the UCM acronym. Offers you full voice, video, data, and mobility features. Really high-end enterprise-grade functionality at a price that is ideal for SMBs with no licensing fees at any point in time. You get this very easy, this very compact, very easy to manage PBX that can control anywhere from 500 up to 2,000 endpoints or registrations depending on the device. What you see here on the screen right now is our UCM 61 and UCM 6200 series. These are the more SMB geared devices in our portfolio. All of the UCM 6100 or 6200 series models will support up to 500 users, whereas the 6208 adds a little bit of capacity to support up to 800 users. These devices, as I mentioned, award-winning devices deployed all over the world on a lot of different platforms, used in a lot of different ways, not only just as unified communication managers, but because of the price that they have and the functionality that they offer. They're also great for local backup devices if you deploy cloud solutions. We've seen these devices used to run security networks, SIP security networks, to run facility access networks with our GDS 3710 and other brands. So really a lot of different uses of these devices. The 6100 series was the first series that we came out with. It has been, I don't want to say it's been updated, but about a little over a year ago, we came out with the 6200 series. The 6200 series is really just the let me go over here. The 6200 series is really just the continuation of the 6100 series. I believe the pricing is pretty much exactly the same. The reason we came out with the 6200 series is because we had to put a new chip in it. The previous chip was no longer being manufactured. And in most cases, it's just easier to give it a slightly different product name. But as you'll see, pretty much exactly the same functionality between the 61 and the 6200 series models. Some of our distributors will still have the 6100 series models in stock. The 6200 series, there are a couple of things that you get on those devices that we enhanced over the 6100 series. The 6208 really is the easiest one to talk about. All the other 61 and 6200 series models will go up to 500 users. If you need something a little bit more, if you need to support a little bit more users than 500, but you don't need the 2,000 you get in our UCM 6510. 6208, which supports up to 800 registrations or users and up to 100 concurrent calls, is the device for you. The other difference with the 6200 series models is they all have built-in DHCP servers, making your installations a little bit easier, and they also all support switch, dual network, or router mode. But you can see between the 61 and the 6200 series models, really the difference is simply just the amount of FXO ports on the device and the amount of concurrent calls that they can support. You see the concurrent calls below SIP devices, anywhere from 30 up to 100. For example, the 6202 will give you 30 concurrent calls, the 6204 will give you 45, the 6208 100, 6108 60. So that's really the main point of differentiation for those devices. And again, the best thing about the UCM series, the whole platform of it, including the 6510, which I'll show you next, full enterprise grade functionality. When we came out with these devices, we took a look at the PBX marketplace. We kind of saw that like video conferencing and a lot of the other markets and networking, a lot of the other markets we've got into, we saw that the options out on the market were really just for large enterprises with large purchasing power, and that small to medium-sized businesses need and would benefit from this technology as much as anybody else. So we set out to design a platform that offers you these enterprise-grade voice, video, data, and mobility features and easy-to-manage PBX in a very affordable fashion. And for example, the 6202 retails for $399 US, which is frankly lower than you're going to find any other PBX out on the market. And it gives you full voice, video, data, mobility support, up to 500 users, 30 concurrent calls, etc. No licensing fees. One of the best things about these devices, you pay the one-time upfront purchase price, and that's it. There are no other licensing fees. Whenever we come out with software or firmware upgrades, those are always free to download and free to install for the lifetime of your product. Again, all hardware, software is included. Saw that slide. All right, so told you about the 6100 series and the 6200 series. So now let's take a look at the 6510. If you're looking for a more high-end PBX that has higher capacity than what you get with the 61 or 6200 series. 6510 is exactly what you're looking for. Let me flip over to this slide. The UCM 6510 basically differentiates itself from the 61 and 6200 series models based on the three things you see here on the screen. Support for up to 2,000 users, 2,000 SIP extensions or registrations, more concurrent call capacity, up to 200 concurrent calls, so double any other UCM 61 or 6200 series model, and it gives you support built in for E1, T1, and J1 ports. So just like the UCM 61 and 6200 series, enterprise grade features, affordable, compact, easy to manage, all done through the web user interface, no licensing fees. Firmware and software upgrades are always free, and when you put all that together, you get all the hardware, software included for the lifetime of the product, and you get full unified communication support for all voice, video, data, and mobility features. One thing that you saw in a couple of the previous slides that I should mention is the UCM interface is entirely based on Asterisk, one of the most popular and stable open source PBX softwares in the world. Essentially what we've done is we've taken the Asterisk platform and we've wrapped our own user interface around it to kind of, give it a Grandstream look and feel to it. One of the things you'll see today, if you haven't seen already, if you may have seen our UCMs in the past but not looked at them recently, we have completely changed the user, not completely changed, but it has been redesigned. I think it is a much more eye-friendly, user-friendly, attractive, easy to maneuver, seamless interface with the new design. All the same features and functionalities are still there. I believe they're pretty much arranged in the same way, but it's just the look and feel of it's a little bit easier to use. So you'll see that. The screenshot you see here in this slide is actually of the old user interface. And the reason why I put this slide up is I always want to call out our zero config feature that the UCMs offer. This is a feature that works with Grandstream products. So the zero configuration feature is only for Grandstream products, but that's not to say that this UCM series of PBXs won't support any SIP service or product. It is a fully open source SIP IP PBX and will be compatible with any third-party SIP product, service, platform, etc. Zero config is something that we've added in to just basically make it easier to deploy Grandstream products, where the device is able to auto-discover any Grandstream endpoint on the same network as the UCM. It is then able to auto-provision those devices either on its own or based on a set of general rules that you apply to it. And zero config can be used to manage remote devices. Sure, Ernesto will cover zero config in depth later on. Last slide for me before we turn it over to go through the technical part of the webinar today. Just wanted to highlight some of the things that we've added to these devices this year. I mentioned earlier that software and firmware upgrades are always free. And this is just to show you that we are always enhancing these devices, adding major features and functionality, and you're never going to pay for any of these new updates or increased integration. So first off, we have done integration with property management systems. These are extremely popular in the hotel and the hospitality industry. They basically allow you to merge. One second. All right. They allow you to basically merge a hotel management platform with a communication platform so that they share information with each other, that the communication platform can be used to manage and send information back into the hospitality management platform. We did testing with, or we have certified H Mobile, popular property management system from a Spanish company, and also certified the Mitel property management software. And we've actually just put out a case study highlighting the UCM's use of Oracle's Opera property management system using H Mobile kind of basically as the go-between to facilitate the connection between the UCM and Oracle. So though we've only certified it with H Mobile and with Mitel Property Management software, those two can be used to facilitate integration with pretty much many other property management systems. We've added integration with CRM platforms, Salesforce One and Sugar CRM, two of the most popular CRMs out there. So if you're a sales-based business, or if your customers use CRM platforms, integrate them with the UCM so that when somebody makes a call, that information is shown on the screen of the phone from the CRM, and that the telephony system or communication system would then feed information back into the CRM. We have a CTI application. It's called Grandstream Affinity. What this allows you to do is basically control all features and functionality of your Grandstream IP phone on your desktop through a simple plugin. Go to grandstream.com, go to support, and if you click on the tools section, you can download the CTI app. We also now support full WebRTC integration with the UCM series. For example, that gives you the ability to basically have people call in from the web, from WebRTC browsers, from emails, from your website, and have those calls go directly into your communication system. All right, I believe that's it for me. Yeah, that's it for me. So bear with us here for just a moment. I'm going to turn it over to Ernesto, and Ernesto is going to take you through the technical training part of today's webinar. So just bear with us here for a second. Yep.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Phil. So let me do a web interface. Let me show you my UCM web interface. Again, my name is Ernesto Calderon. I'm going to go over the web interface of the UCM, sort of like a hands-on training. I'm going to try to concentrate it to the basic stuff, so at least you have an idea how to configure a PBX, all the benefits and features that you have that you can gain with our PBX UCM 61 and 6200 series. The web interface is similar to the UCM 6510, as Phil mentioned. All these three models, they are wrapped up in within the same firmware, same web interface. Everything's going to be the same. So feature-wise are also the same. That's why we share the same firmware version across the board with all these three PBX models. So let me get started with the PBX, with the system status or the dashboard. In the latest firmware, a few months ago that we released, we introduced some changes to the web interface. Some of the changes that we made was to precisely make some changes in the dashboard. So in one chat, in one page, you can have the status, you can feel the whole system status in one page, in one single page. Before getting to the dashboard, let me give you a quick reminder. If you go to our website, firmware.grandstream.com, we released a new firmware last week, I believe, firmware 15.16. If you have an older firmware, older than 14.24, please make sure that you have the latest firmware, because there is an important security patch included in the latest firmware. So again, 14.24 or older doesn't have that fix or that patch. So make sure that you have the latest. 15.16 is the latest firmware as of today. All right, back to the web interface. Top left corner, you can see the status of the partitions. You can see how much storage you have available. If you have connected an external media, like a USB drive, for example, or an SD card, you can also see that information from the dashboard. I don't have anything connected right now on my UCM. To the right, you have the resources usage, very important for troubleshooting. You can see within the last few seconds or maybe a minute the usage of the CPU and the memory. So, for example, if you're having some audio quality issues, probably you want to check this first to make sure that the UCM is not being overused. Depending on the model, as Phil mentioned before, you have some limitation of concurrent calls. So from 25 all the way to 100 concurrent calls, depending on the model, is what is supported. Then at the bottom, let me scroll down, you have the PBX status, so you can see how many extensions you have, how many calls are active, how many conference room you have, and how many of those are in use. Same thing for call queues, parking lots, and some of the features, security features. It'll be nice for you to know in one single page the status of these features, of these settings, if they are enabled or disabled. Dynamic defense, failed to ban, and these are one of the main two features that I always recommend if you have a PBX connected directly to your modem. Then to the right, we have the interface status, so you can see, even if you are not on site, you can see if there's any media connected, plugged into the device, like a USB stick, SD card, LAN port, because some PBXs, they come with 2 ports, LAN and 1, so you can see which one is connected to it. And of course, the FXS ports, all the UCM, they come with 2 FXS. Then you can see from here the status of these 2 FXS ports, and same as the FXO ports. Following to the right, we have the trunk status, so similar to the interfaces. So sometimes you want to know what trunks or SIP trunk, either analog trunks or SIP trunk, the status of those trunks, if they are connected, if they are available, if they are in use, or if they are not reachable. For the SIP trunk, for example, if your service provider is down, then you can see that from this menu. The UCM also support some event actions that you can configure. So upon detecting any of these trunk, for example, being not available, then the UCM can send you an email notification so you are aware even if you are not on site, just to avoid waiting a phone call, a complaint call from your customers. Following, we had the system information, typical data that you need to know. For example, what type of hardware, what type of firmware it's on, uptime, things like that. Similar to the network, you can see the IP addresses, MAC address, etc. Then for the active calls menu, this is something that I like. I don't have any active call at this time, but sometimes you want to know, first of all, who is calling who, for how long the call is being on in one menu, in one shot. So you can see that from one extension making or receiving a call to what number they're calling or they're receiving the call from. And after, I believe, each individual call status is going to be showing with a different coloring. So I believe a gray color is a typical call within less than 10 minutes, and then after 10 minutes, it's going to be changing color. When you are in a call for more than 60 minutes, it's going to show as red. So that's a good indication that something is going on, or at least it's a red flag that you need to consider. Within this same menu, under each individual call, you have 2 buttons, which I can show you one right now, but these 2 buttons are for hang up that particular call or bridge into it, or sort of like a join that particular call. So we have different options that you can bridge into that call. One is called a spy mode. The other one is called whispering, meaning supervisor mode. And the other one is sort of like a 3-way call. So depending on your case, you can select that and then enter your own extension number. And then the UCM is going to call your phone so you can bridge into that particular call. Alrighty, let me jump into the main stuff, the extensions and trunks. Okay, so this is where you add your extensions. Typically, there's no extension by default. I'm going to show you quickly how to configure a few extensions by using the zero config feature. Zero config is sort of like a plug and play. Just connect the phones in the network, and then you can assign the extensions from the UCM web interface. Obviously, before that, you need to have some extensions. I created some for you, but let me show you how to create a batch of extensions super quickly. So there's an option here that says select add method. So you have a single extension and then you have the batch. So for demo purpose, I'm going to select batch, and then right here you're going to select how many extensions you want to create. By default it's 5 extensions, and everything below you should keep it as default. Go all the way, make sure that everything's right. Permission level, I'm going to talk about that later, but the permission level for those 5 extensions. And then when you click save, then all 5 extensions are going to be created automatically. Once you have extensions, then we have to go down here to zero config. So zero config, as Phil mentioned before, is a proprietary feature that we developed, and this option or this setting allows you to automatically detect any Grandstream phone, so you can provision it from this menu. The UCM is compatible with any third-party phones as well, but the zero config is an option only for Grandstream phones. Now, I don't have any phones connected in the network, but they're going to start showing up in this menu. Then on the right-hand side, there's an edit button. You click on that and then select an extension, and that's it. However, I want to show you the 3 methods or 3 modes that you can use zero config. The one that I just showed you is the default one. Basically, you create your extensions, then you come to zero config, then your phones are going to start showing up, popping up in the menu, and then you assign an extension on each particular phone. There's another mode that we call it automatic. So when you enable this option, you go down here, and then you have 2 more options. You can do auto assign extensions, or you can use enable pick extension. So the first one, if you enable it, basically upon detecting, as soon as you connect any Grandstream phone, the UCM is going to detect it automatically. It's going to be transparent, by the way. You don't need to do anything from the web UI. Just enable this option, click save, and then as you connect phones in the network, UCM is going to recognize it, detect it, and automatically provision an extension randomly. It's going to be using this range from 5,000 to 6,300 in a sequential order. You can always change that range to any range as you need by clicking this option here. So that's what we call the auto assign extension. The other mode that you can use, the zero config, is what we call pick extension. So this is good for existing deployments where you are replacing an existing PBX. That particular office has already extensions with some numbers that you basically want to go to each cubicle and replace the legacy phone with the Grandstream phone by keeping the same extension. So first of all, you need to find out what is the extension range of that particular deployment. Let's say that it's a 300 to 399, for example. Then you come here, go to pick extension segment, and then you change it, right, from 300 to 399. Then when you enable this option, you go to the office, connect a phone into the network. You know that you are in cubicle that used to be extension 303, for example. Then when the Grandstream phone reboots, from the menu, from the phones menu, you're gonna select extension 303. Simple as that. Then you move on to the next cubicle. That's a nice way, a nice mode to take advantage of zero config. You have a small field over here that says pick extension period. So obviously that menu at boot up time on the phone is going to show up during this time. Let's say that you are thinking or planning to do that installation in 2 hours, for example. Then you enter here 2 for 2 hours, and then all the phones upon rebooting, they're going to show that menu within 2 hours. Then after that period, they're going to reboot normally. I just want to briefly explain that the zero config has some templates that can help you to provision your Office massively. So instead of provisioning a specific settings to each particular phone, then you can create your templates that with a language, for example, a date format, or anything that you can imagine. You have full access to all the settings supported by all the Grandstream phones. So you make the changes in this global policy, you save it, then every time that the UCM provision a phone is going to include these particular settings. Then we have some global other features, let's say we call it global template or model template, that the global template applies to a particular model, a particular group of examples. So you can create a template that you're going to call it, for example, accounting, because you know that your accounting department, they have a specific set of features. Then when you are provisioning these phones, you are going to select the template that you named previously as accounting. So then you can have in this page multiple templates for accounting, for example, the warehouse, which in the warehouse probably they're using ATAs, so you have a set of features dedicated for those type of phones. And then lastly, we have a model template that based on the Grandstream model, again back to the example of ATAs, you know that your ATAs, they're going to have a specific set of features that you want to apply to these particular devices only, but not to the other Grandstream models. Then you create a template here, select the model as one of our ATAs, for example, HD802, then create your settings as you wish, save it, and then the system automatically, upon detecting the phone that is an ATA, a Handytone 801 or 802, then it's going to apply these settings automatically. So everything's to make the installation process more efficiently and quicker. Lastly, we have the model update. Sometimes Grandstream releases introduce new phones. If you don't want to upgrade the firmware, that the new firmware obviously is going to include the latest template phones. Then you can come here to this option. You can keep the same firmware as that you have. Let's say that is not the latest. Not a good example for today, by the way. As I mentioned before, you need to have the latest firmware in order to protect your system of security issues that we experienced in the past. But if you have a firmware that is working just fine, no issues, then you don't need to upgrade it. You don't want to upgrade it, but you purchase new phones, then you come here, find the phone model that you just purchased, and click the download button, and that's it. So instead of upgrading the UCM firmware, then you can download the template from this menu. All right. So let's go back. We have extensions already. Now let's do the trunks. Trunk is obviously, we support analog trunks and zip trunks. Let me show you a little bit about the analog trunks first. So you click on the create new analog trunk. This UCM that I'm showing to you today comes with 8 FXO ports. This is a UCM 6108. So basically you select the FXO ports that you want to be part of the trunk. Typically you need to select, typically you're using all the ports, right? However, if you have different telco providers that one gives you a better rate to call some countries or cities or states, then you can select the ports that are connected to that particular phone provider, right? Then in the trunk name, for you to know, then you can enter that telco provider, for example, or maybe the DID associated to that number. It's up to you. You can enter any name. Then you click save, and then you have a trunk. However, there are some settings that I want to show you quickly. The UCM has an auto detection mode that just by selecting the trunks and click save, that should be enough. However, if you run into some static in the line, echo, for example, maybe the caller ID is not showing correctly, then you need to do some troubleshooting. We have an option that you can manually make the proper changes for your caller ID scheme, call disconnection, or at the bottom we have this button right here, PSTN detection. That is going to let the UCM run the test for you and apply the settings for you. Super easy. Just enter the source pot line, destination, let's say the following port, and then the destination phone number. So when you click detect, the UCM is going to dial out as a loop, right? It's going to dial out and the call is going to come back to the port number 2. And then the UCM is going to start sending some signals to basically auto-detect the best settings for those lines. If you ever run into any more specific issues, Grandstream provides help desk. So feel free to go to helpdesk.grandstream.com so you can sign up for an account and you can open a support ticket at any time. Let's move on to the VoIP trunks. I think I didn't save it. Okay. In the VoIP trunks is where you add your SIP trunk providers. We call it VoIP trunk because in this menu, besides your SIP trunk provider, you can also add a remote PBX. Let's say that you have a deployment with multiple branches, the main office, headquarters, and satellite branches. And then you have UCMs on each location. So obviously, in order to interconnect all these UCMs, then you need to add the remote UCM through this menu. Because at the end, for this particular UCM that you're seeing, and the remote peers, it doesn't matter. It could be a SIP trunk provider or another UCM. At the end, it's the same signaling structure. So you click on Create New SIP trunk. We have 2 modes, as you may know. SIP trunk providers, they give you 2 options, either by authenticating by your IP address or by giving you SIP credentials, a user ID and a password. I highly recommend, if your SIP trunk provider supports IP authentication, then select peer SIP trunk, enter a name for your SIP trunk provider, for example, and then of course the IP address of your SIP trunk provider. Then down here you have some settings. Keep original caller ID, for example. That's a good option, that when you are, for example, an incoming call from your SIP trunk, right, is then forwarded back to your cell phone, for example, then that call is going to be forwarded back to the SIP trunk. Then if you enable this option, when you receive that call, let's say that you step out of the office and forward your extension to your cell phone. When you are out of the office and people calling your extension, then the UCM is going to forward that call to your cell phone, right? So on your cell phone, you're going to receive a caller ID. You have 2 options, either to see the caller ID of your office, right? Or to see the caller ID of the original caller. So depending on your needs, you can enable or disable this option. Then, for SIP trunk, sometimes the providers, they request or that you enter some caller ID, name. You can record anything that is going through this particular trunk. Okay, now we have a SIP trunk. remember that Grandstream support for the signaling protocol, we are a SIP company only. All our phones, all our ATAs, all our product is supports SIP protocol. We do not support IIX, which is another signaling protocol, but because this UCM is an Asterix-based PBX, and as you know, Asterix developed the IIX signaling protocol, then that's why we have this protocol enabled only in the UCM. If you have a third-party phone that supports IIX, then, or a SIP trunk provider in this case, then you can add a trunk using that particular signaling protocol. Lastly, before I move out of the VoIP trunks, I want to show you this. Sometimes when you have a SIP trunk provider, you purchase a bunch of DIDs. You have the main DID, or probably you have multiple DIDs that you can assign each individual DID to an extension or a department. So when you are making an outbound call, what DID you would like to include during that outbound call? So that's why we created a DOD, where you basically select the DID that you want to include in your outbound calls. Then you want to say, you know what, I want these 3 extensions that when they make an outbound call, they are going to include this DID number. You save it. Then if you have a second DID, you do the same thing. But then you select other extensions. That's why the UCM is multi-tenancy friendly. It's not that we are 100% multi-tenancy, but the UCM is so flexible that you can use one appliance, one UCM for multiple companies. Because you can do call routing based on the DID, incoming and outbound. You have, I have a lot of customers using just one box as a multi-tenancy. Again, it's not 100% multi-tenancy. There are some features that we don't support, but by the way, it's in a roadmap to include that feature. So keep an eye on that. So now that we have our trunks, analog trunk and SIP trunk, you need to create your route, inbound and outbound route. So let's start with an outbound route. You click on add, enter a name. So for my outbound calls, let's call it domestics, for example, which is typically a 10-digit numbers, right? So then in your pattern, you enter 10x's, or if you check in the tooltips over here, you can see all the patterns allowed or the wildcards. So as you know, in North America, you can use capital N's at the beginning. This is to simplify it and to make it more easy for the UCM to recognize that you are dialing a 10-digit number. Or you can enter just basically that, or you can enter an X only, an X and a dot. That means any number. But in case you have different outbound routes, then you need to specify them. In an office, typical office installation, you have your domestic calls, you have your international calls, and probably you have your branch-to-branch calling. The remote branch is using extensions 3000, for example, then you need to include that here. So again, for domestics calls, you enter your 10-digit number. And then, of course, the destination. So who's going to be sending out those domestic calls? I included my analog trunk. You can also you can strip or prepend digits. And most important, you have your failovers. If the analog trunks are busy, so then you can use a secondary trunk. And again, you can have multiple trunks, not only 2, but 5, 10, unlimited. Then you have your failover as my SIP trunk. Click Save. You can even create a time condition. So domestic calls, Monday to Friday, 8 to 6 p.m. for example, I want to use this particular trunk. But out of office hours, I don't want anyone to dial. So probably I can send the calls to an announcement saying something, you're not allowed to make any calls at this time. Or probably you can send the call through another trunk. All right, click Save. Then a good example, I'm gonna make a second example for international calls. So you enter your rule name, then in your pattern, obviously you enter 011, which is the international access code in North America. If you are in another country, I know in other countries they use 0 only or 00, so you need to enter that here. I forgot to mention that you have some option that you can include a PIN number. The pins are typically more useful in international calling, right? So then you can enter a password, any number that you want. Then when you dial a 011 number, the system is gonna prompt to enter the PIN number. You can even select the call duration. So by enabling this option, then you can enter, the time. There's a warning message, by the way, when reaching the expiration time or the duration limit, the system is gonna warn the caller. So you can include, that message is gonna be repeated. So you can enter multiple data numbers here. And then obviously the destination. So for international calls, probably you want to use your SIP trunk provider. And again, you can add a failover or a time condition. Okay, so we have extensions, trunks, and an outbound route. Let's do an incoming route. My bad. Any questions, Phil, that I can help you right now?
Let's see what we got here. There's a couple I was holding on to. For zero config, do you need to basically enable that on the phone side?
No, the zero config automatically any Grandstream phone comes with the zero config option enabled.
Okay. Couple of questions actually about setting up SLA. Just generally, how easy it is to set up and how do you do it with the UCM?
Sure. Basically, you can configure anything on the phone, right? So I don't know if they're referring to the SLA station that I have here in my system start extension menu, but I'm going to explain about both. SLAs are supported on the phone. You can configure any setting on your phones from the zero config. When you add an extension into that particular phone, then you have a menu that you can configure your what we call the multi-purpose keys, the MPKs. So you can configure a key with multiple purposes. For example, speed dial, VLF, SLA, sending DTMF, things like that nature. So you can do that from the zero config. If the intention of the question is about the SLA station, that's something a little different. What the SLA station does is, remember, we are a digital PBX that is trying to emulate a legacy PBX, right? On the legacy analog PBXs, in your phone, you used to have, let's say, the lines buttons attached. On each particular button is attached to the pot line. So when you press that button, when you're pressing button 1, for example, you are using line 1. that is connected on your PSTN. And when you press button 2, same thing, right? So when you receive a call and put that call on hold, anyone in the office, they can select line 2 because it's blinking, so then they can retrieve that call. So in a digital environment, that is not easy to accomplish, because typically you have SIP trunks, or you have the analog lines as well. So we created an option that you can create stations, and then depending how many analog line you have, from 1 through 8, then you can have an SLA station with 8 lines. That information that UCM is gonna push it to the phones in a way, in sort of like a BLF. So at the end, for the user perspective, on the Grandstream phone, they're gonna see buttons that are linked to the PSTN lines. There's a document explaining how to set up SLA station on a website. So you can take a look at that.
Cool. A couple of people have been commenting on this in the chat, so I figured I would read it out loud and see what you have to say. Issues when logging into the UCM getting a certificate error. And what somebody pointed out that it needs an SSL certificate assigned to the UCM, and I guess we used to maybe not support that, but that it may have been solved in a recent firmware upgrade. I wonder if you could comment on that.
Yeah, it's not an error, by the way, but I understand when you log in the first time to any Grandstream UCM, because we are using HTTPS, then your browser is kind of warning you that this particular connection is not secured. So there's some buttons in the browser that you can bypass that. You can either disable HTTPS on the UCM, not recommended, but simple as one click. Then every time that you access the UCM, you don't get that message. Or you can buy a certificate on multiple websites, GoDaddy, or there's some of them that are free today, by the way. I don't have the name on top of my head, but you need to purchase a certificate. The UCM has an option that you can upload that certificate. So every time that you access from your browser, you don't have that warning.
Cool. If you don't mind, one more question, and then we can get back to the webinar. And actually, this may be something that you're still going to cover, but what is the best way to set up a remote user who is in a different location, configuring their phone, etc.?
Yeah, that's a good question. We have that's the main purpose of having an IP PBX, that you can have any IP phone registered to the PBX from anywhere, as long as they have internet access, right? So typically most of the extensions are within the same network as where the PBX is connected to, but sometimes you have remote employees working from home, or even using a Grandstream soft phone. We call it Grandstream Wave, which is, by the way, a free soft phone that you can download from your iOS and Android platforms. So these are remote extensions. You need to make sure that the UCM is accessible from the public network, meaning that you need to do some port forwardings. So remote extensions can access the UCM in case you have a firewall, right? Which, by the way, we always recommend putting the UCM behind a firewall. The UCM can be connected directly to the modem with a public IP. The UCM has some firewall settings and even has some security settings that you can enable. However, if you have a firewall, I highly recommend it to put the UCM behind that. Regardless, then you need to make sure that that UCM is reachable from outside, meaning the IP address, the public IP address, is reachable from outside by doing some network port forwarding. That one, depending on the equipment that you're using, you should know how to do that. And forwarding the ports. So for a voice over IP, Grandstream is using the typical port 5060 for signaling, and for RTP or the media, we are using from 20,000 to 40,000. Those ports, by the way, are configurable in the settings that I'm going to explain that later today. And then you need to manually configure that remote phone by entering the SIP server, which is the UCM IP address, and then the extension, the password. For GS Wave, which is a soft phone, we have an option. I think I can explain that very quick. Let's say that your remote employee using a soft phone GS Wave is extension 1001, for example. So when you select that, you have an option here, email notification. That will give you, the UCM is email ready, by the way. Sorry. So the UCM is email ready, meaning that by using a non-authenticated option, the UCM can start sending emails. That particular extension, 1001, when you created it, it should have an email address, right? The user's email address. So when you click this option, the UCM is going to send an email. That email is going to contain a QR code that your Grandstream Wave can scan and get provision automatically. So that's a good way to provision remote extensions on a Grandstream Wave. But if you have a phone, then you need to do the configuration manually. All right, let's continue with the webinar. I'm going to explain the inbound route. So obviously for any incoming call reaching the PBX, you need to have some directions where to send that call to, typically to an IVR or out attendant, or to a particular extension or ring group. So this is how you do it. First of all, you select the trunk. Let's keep the analog trunk for now. So all the calls coming through my analog trunk, I am going to forward it, and this is my destination. Then you have basically everything, right? You can send the calls to an extension, a particular extension, to an IVR. Let me see what I have, or probably to a ring group.
Water, anything?
Thank you. Or to one particular extension. So then you select the extension that you want to use, and that's it. So any incoming call through the analog trunk is gonna ring this particular extension, 1002, or this particular IVR. You can add a time condition, right? So office hours, Monday to Friday, 8 to 6, incoming calls are gonna go to the main IVR, and then after hours, depending on the time condition, it's gonna go to a different IVR, like the off-hour IVR. We have a caller ID pattern. That's a good option for, let's say key employees. So when they dial the main number from their cell phones, then the system can detect that, okay, this is Ernesto's cell phone. I'm going to send the calls to this particular destination. So then you can enter, cell phone number or caller ID numbers, multiple, and the system will route the calls based on your caller ID. Okay, sorry about the letters, but that's the intention of the caller ID pattern. So very easy. You can even include another info. Remember that I told you about the multi-tenancy? That's a good way. So for example, if you have lines that are associated to company ABC, for example, so when the call comes in through those lines, then you can send the calls to the receptionist extension, for example, and then include a particular ringtone. So when he or she receives that call, the phone is going to ring distinctively. So she knows how to greet the customer. All right, so let me save this. And let me show you how to do an inbound route on a SIP trunk. In a SIP tron, you have more benefit because it's SIP, so obviously you can detect what DID number they dialed. So in the same example, if you purchase 10 DIDs with your provider, then you can say, you know what, people who dial this number, I want them to go to a particular extension, for example. Okay? And then you save it. And then you can create a second inbound route with either, you can keep it blank, the pattern, or you can enter another DID number that you have, and then people who dial this number, then you can send the calls to a different destination. Again, an IVR, a ring group, basically anything that is supported on the PBX. Callback queue, a call queue. So that's the intention. You send it to an IVR. Or you can basically keep it blank, right? You can delete it, and that means that any DID that they dial can be sent to that particular extension or destination. Okay? All right, so we have inbound, outbound routes configured. Now let me show you a little bit of the call features. Perfect. So as Phil was mentioning, the UCM support, conference room, IVR, ring groups, call queues, and multiple call features. For the conference menu, you can basically create a conference super easily, just clicking the create new conference room and save. That's it. However, you have some settings that you can take advantage. For example, you can create a conference room in a quiet mode, meaning that anyone joining the conference, the system is not gonna prompt or providing a beep sound that someone joined or left. You can announce the callers, so when someone joining, the system is gonna prompt the caller to ask to enter his name, followed by pound, I believe. Then when the call is connected to the conference, the system is gonna replay back that name. And of course, you can record the whole conference. You can make it private. You can, by doing that, then you need to enter an admin password. So people joining the conference, they must enter a PIN number. Then as the administrator, from the web UI of the UCM, you can see how many people are in that conference. I don't have anything now, of course. If there's many people, they're going to be listed, all the participants in this menu. On the right hand side, under options, you have multiple options to mute that individual, to hang up that particular call. Yeah, only these two. However, in the conference room general settings, then you can invite all the participants from the web UI. Or you can invite another conference room that probably is in a remote UCM. We added not too long ago a scheduler. So when you create your conferences, you can create a conference schedule. Then the system is going to automatically call the phones listed in the conference schedule. But more, in my opinion, I think it's very nice to synchronize it with Google Calendar. So this is where you enter your Google Calendar settings. That means that when you create a conference schedule in the UCM, that information is going to be pushed to your calendar, Google Calendar. So then you're going to receive the typical Google notifications before the meeting happens. And then you can see the conference recordings in this menu. All right, IVRs. In IVRs, you can create multiple IVRs. You can Let me show you how to do that. You need to have the recordings first. You need to either upload the recording from any phone, or you can have a nice professional recording that you can upload to the UCM. So you enter a name, and you have some options that within the IVR, when someone dialing in and listening to the IVR, they can have multiple options to dial an extension, to dial a conference, to dial, make a page call, you know, or maybe all depends. For security reason, my opinion, I recommend just to enable extensions only. And this is where you upload your recordings or your prompt. By default, we have this sample, but you can click on the prompt menu and then jump into that menu where you can upload the recordings. And then most important, the pressing events. So this is where, you know, when press 1 for sales, 2 for support, that kind of a typical IVR. Then you can, this is how you entered your events. Okay. All right, we have an IVR, and how about ring groups? Very common. You create your ring groups like this, enter a name, and select the extensions. Move it to the right. Sometimes you have many extensions that you don't want to start scrolling down, so we added a nice option that you can basically enter, you know, the number, and then the system automatically is gonna search it up for you. Once you select your extension on the right hand side, you can also, if in case you have a remote UCM, like a remote branch, you can also have remote extensions that are registered to a remote UCM. They can be shown by synchronizing LDAP. These two UCM phone books, they're going to be synchronized using LDAP, right? The benefit, besides having the phone book updated in all the phones with all the extensions in all the UCMs in the company, you can also add a remote extension into a particular ring group. And then the strategies, right? So ring in order or ring simultaneously. You can record calls going to that ring group, and that's it. You also have an option that if no one answers, you can still send the call to a different destination. All right, now we have a ring group. How about a call queue? We added a lot of reporting, and we improved the call queue, in other words, in the last couple firmwares, so not too long ago. Keep an eye on that. So this is how you create a call queue. Basically just enter a name and add your agents. Similar to the ring group, you select the agents, move it to the right. And these are the new settings that we added. You have now a virtual queue, a position announcement, so now people can hear in what position they are. Other settings like dial in when the call queue is empty. That can be allowed or not allowed. Maximum wait time, for example, when reaching this time, what's going to happen? You can end the call or maybe transfer it to another destination. You have destination prompt cycle. that's a good way, a good opportunity to play back an announcement. Could be an advertisement or reminder, how to, get some product, whatever the company that you're installing the UCM is for, or basically just to say, all our agents are busy, please wait a little more. So let's save that. All right, we have a lot of call features, speed dial, voicemail, but let me show you other settings that I think are more important. Are we good in time?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. For example, PBX settings, and under general settings, there are a few settings that I would like to show you. Remember the extension range. This is where you manipulate your extension ranges. For example, the user extensions, the auto provisioning extensions, the conference extensions. So you can change that. Every time that you change something, everything needs to correlate with the following ranges, let's say. Sometimes too difficult that you can probably disable the extension range. So the system is basically going to let you assign the extensions every time that you create anything, like a ring group, for example, then you need to enter that extension number. Under SIP settings, for security, this is something that we always recommend. If you have the UCM connected to the public network, always change the port number. Default is 5060, but you can change it to anything else. Okay, these are settings for troubleshooting, or I believe what I wanted to show you. Remember that someone was asking about what ports to forward if you have a firewall. So by default, remember the SIP setting, the SIP port, which is 5060 or whatever you change it to, and the RTP port. Those are the ports that you need to make sure that are forwarded or allowed in your firewall. My bad, the default now is 10,000 to 20,000. Again, you can always change that here. For music on hold, you have an option that you can upload your music on hold, you can delete, or you can make changes to the existing music on hold. You can have your nice professional recordings and upload it from this menu. Or you have your voice prompt, then for your greetings, for example, in custom prompt, this is where you upload your IVR prompts, for example, your announcements. Typically extend IVRs and announcement. You upload it here. You can always change the system prompt, meaning, when the UCM detects an error, the UCM is going to say, call could not be completed, all circuits are busy, things like that, in that nature. You can change those system prompt to different languages. We basically support all the languages, most of the languages. These are asterisk-based language package, by the way. We don't touch these. So once you add the language, every time you create an extension, then you can choose what language that extension is going to be under. All right, under system settings, you have a couple of options for HTTP. Someone was asking earlier how to avoid that the browser is gonna give you that missing security option in the web browser. So either by disabling HTTPS, not recommended, of course, but just if you enter HTTP, then you're not gonna have that prompt anymore. But if you do want to use an encryption, a certificate, then you need to purchase one and then you upload it in from this menu. Okay. For security, default port number is 8089. You can always change that. Another option that you need to change, I think the default is enabled. This is what we call redirect from port 80. So when you're dialing and when you're entering just the IP address of your UCM, the UCM is redirecting automatically from 80 to whatever you have here, which is 8089. So for security, you can disable that, but you need to remember the port number when typing the address on your browser. UCM support IPv4 and IPv6. OpenVPN, very nice option. For remote extensions, someone was asking. Remote extensions, you can also use OpenVPN. You can VPN from the phone into the UCM. Our phones, all Grandstream phones, they support OpenVPN client, and the UCM now supports OpenVPN as a server. You can create the VPN client side on the customer's network prem or by using the Grandstream phone. We support DNS with these providers, dndns.org, noip.com. Some of them are free, some of them are paid. Basically, to get to have a free domain name in order to access your UCM. Some of the security settings. For security reasons, you must enable this type of typical firewall settings. Okay, so you need to click on the. We have a couple options: the ping defense and the ping of death defense. If you have the UCM connected directly to your modem, I highly recommend enabling this option. And then these are the typical firewall rules that you can create, either to accept, reject, or drop packets from different type of traffic, inbound or outbound. And then you have different services, or you can customize it. You can enter reject packet from any IP, but allow packets from a particular IP, which could be your service provider, for example. Dynamic defense, very similar, but in this case, no rules, just enable this. What I do highly recommend is the fail to ban. Especially if you have the UCM exposed to the public network, you must enable it. So turn that option on, and that's it. You don't need to do anything else. Automatically, the UCM is detecting what they call SIP attacks, in order to gain access to an extension and start making international calls. So by enabling this option, the UCM is automatically banning IP addresses and keep them in the blacklist. There's an event option that you can be notified when that happens, by the way. All right, let's move on to the maintenance menu. Any questions, Phil, that I can answer now?
I would finish up. I've got a bunch, and we can go through them once you finish up.
Perfect. All right, so obviously this is where you manage your users. Obviously the super admin is the primary administrator. As you know, new PBXs, they come with a admin password on a sticker. So you need to check the UCM. On the back of the UCM, you're gonna find it's a random generated password. Okay, so in case you reset your PBX, you must be on site to read the password out of the sticker. And then every time that you create an extension, it will create a user portal, a user ID. So this individual, they can log in to the UCM to their portal, so they can see settings pretending only to their extensions. They can download voicemail, they can download faxes, and they can configure some call features like call forwarding, for example. for, let's say, for troubleshooting on main, and this is very important, the operation log. As an administrator, you need to know who has access to it, who tried to access, and everything's logged for you to know in case you are doing an audit or maintaining the PBX. You need to come here. You can download that information as a CSV file, or you can filter it also for a particular event. Troubleshooting, if you open a support ticket with Grandstream, we always recommend providing a trace. Traces with syslog included. So if you ever reach out to Grandstream and they are asking for a syslog, this is how you configure it. Basically, you don't need to have a syslog server, by the way. If you have one, even better, because you can monitor the PBX for 24/7 or constantly. But if you want to specifically collect the logs for a particular, for a few minutes, when you are reproducing a particular problem, then you need to enter any IP address here, for example, your network gateway, and you can select all modules. If Grandstream told you what module specifically you need to select, then you can check that, and then debug. Okay, make sure that you enable the debug option. Then you save it. So remember, you need to have an IP address here that we're gonna force the UCM to send syslog out to the wire. We don't care where, but at least out to the wire. Then network troubleshooting. This is where you can capture a PCAP, or packet capture. Basically, you click start, reproduce the problem. When the issue happens, hang up, then you stop it, and then you download the trace. That's a PCAP file that you can open with any WireChart software, and that's a good trace that is going to contain not only the zip packets, but also the syslogs. All right, CDRs. CDRs, as you know, we support that. There's a menu that you can see. You can get all the IVRs in a web interface manner, but you can also download it. You can download all the records. It's a CSV file. Then you can upload to your your preferred reporting software, or even billing software. You can filter based on the caller ID, extension number, multiple criteria. And if they were recorded, then there's a record button or playback button on this area that you can download it. But sometimes you have so many calls that you want to find specifically the recording files. So this is where you can find only the call recorded. The UCM has an API that you can interconnect billing software, for example, or maybe a reporting software that can request and collect data out of the UCM. So this is where you enable that. There's a document on our website, so you need to learn what commands are available. But this is where you enable it and create your credentials. Lastly, value-added features. We talk about the zero config. AMI, as an open source PBX, a lot of people would like to have access to the Asterix management interface. We prefer not to allow that. We prefer that you configure or administer the PBX through the web UI. However, based on request, we enable an AMI with basic with read-only capacity. So you can access the AMI, and then you can have multiple privileges, so originate calls, CDR agent, etc. you need to create your credentials, and then open your terminal, access the UCM, and then you're going to be accessing the AMI. We also support CTI server. There's a document on our website that you can make the UCM compatible with a billing report software called CTI. In order to accomplish that interaction, you need to specify the port number here. For CRM, the UCM is compatible with a couple CRMs, Sugar CRM, for example, or Salesforce. Basically, by enabling this option, these third-party CRMs, they're going to integrate with the UCM and collect data, or vice versa. The UCM, upon receiving a call, is going to query into the CRM database for multiple data. For example, the contacts, the leads, or the accounts table. So depending on your CRM, Salesforce, for example, then you have multiple ways to look up. And then the incoming call is going to present that data into the caller ID, into the phone's display. They're going to see, customer number, for example, maybe address or whatever the CRM provides. For PMS, as Phil was mentioning before, we integrate that with a couple of PMS middleware, Edge Mobile, and actually here, and Mitel, I believe, yeah. So basically, these are middlewares that are compatible with large amount of softwares dedicated to the hotels. So by the UCM integrating with one of these two PMS, then you can use this UCM in a hotel environment. Some of the features, obviously, that you can accomplish by using a PMS is the room status, wake-up call service, minibar. We have more documentation on our website to explain how to configure the PMS. Without having a PMS, you can also use the wake-up service by creating extensions or room that are associated with an extension number. For faxing, either the user can log into his user portal, and then from that portal they can upload a PDF file, enter a phone number, and then just click send, and the fax is gonna go out. From the administrator interface, like I'm showing you now, you can do the same thing. And then down here you have a sort of like a log, so you can see the status of these fax that were sent in the past. And getting close to the last setting, announcement center. This is a nice option that you can pre-record an announcement, create a group of extensions. Then the UCM is going to start dialing all these extensions one by one and play back that particular announcement. Unfortunately, the numbers that you can include in the announcement center are extensions only, because that would be a good option for dialing out an external number. So currently, we support extensions only. So that basically covered most of the features that I wanted to show you. So you have an idea of the Grandstream PBX. If you have any questions, we're gonna go over a Q&A. Phil's gonna help reading the questions. Some of them he answered already through the chat, and I answered some of them during my webinar. We're gonna allocate a few minutes to answer most of the questions. If some of the questions I'm not able to answer it, bear with us. We can reply back specifically to your email later on.
Cool. Thanks, Ernesto. Awesome job as always. So yeah, I went through the chat, and pulled out the questions that I'm pretty sure were not answered. Do want to thank some of you guys in the chat for answering questions that some of our attendees had. That's awesome. I always love to see our, you know, our whatever you want to call it, Grandstream evangelist reseller group. Always love to see you guys helping each other out. So do want to thank those of you that did help us answer some of the questions in the chat. One thing before we do go through the questions, if you do have any additional ones, feel free to type them over to us. If you don't mind, use the question and answer panel. It's easier for me to keep track of the questions then as they come in. So before we go through the questions, I do want to say that this is a 1.5 to 2 hour training webinar. We do full day in-person trainings on the UCM series. So there's just no possible way that we can cover everything here today. It's meant to be a quick kind of introduction to allow you to answer some of the questions that you may have if you're an experienced user, or give you an introduction. If you're looking for a lot more in-depth education, hands-on training with our engineers in the room, head on over to our training. Actually, it's the Grandstream Academy is now where we're doing all of our trainings, which you can find at academy.grandstream.com. And before we wrap up later, I'll give you more information on the Grandstream Academy and what that kind of means to our training and certification process going forward. But anyway, let's get into these questions. Does CNAM with trunk carrier overwrite the DoD value?
We're doing numbers only. That's a good question. We have a feature request to override the name part of the caller ID also. So stay tuned. Keep an eye on the release note. Probably in the next firmware release, we're going to include that.
Some of you are saying that the question and answer panel does not seem to be working. Apologize for that. Everything I can verify from my own side seems to show that it is working. So apologize for that. If it's not working for you, just shoot it over through the chat for now. So let's get back to these questions. Can you interconnect two UCMs using SIP trunks?
Yeah, definitely. That's the purpose of interconnecting. As a matter of fact, that's the primary protocol that I recommend. Although both UCM, the UCM, they support IIX as well. So depending on your network environment, you can probably use IIX. But 99% of the time, I recommend using SIP.
Cool. One person in particular is saying that they're having issues doing that. Any like common issues or concerns that you see in doing that this person might be able to look into to solve their problem?
Yeah, of course. When you add a remote UCM, you need to consider a couple settings. Obviously, you need to create the UCM, or you need to add the remote UCM under the VoIP trunk menu as I showed you, right? After doing that, then you need to create your inbound and outbound routes. So obviously, when you're calling from one UCM to the other UCM extensions, then you need to have an outbound route. And at the same time, for the remote extension, you need to have an inbound route so you can allow incoming calls from that particular UCM. So again, VoIP trunks, in and outbound route, those are the three primary settings that you need to configure. If you're still running into issues, probably we're talking about some network issues that we can help you overcome by opening a support ticket with us. Probably something related to the NAT IP, something related to your firewall. But yes, open a support ticket and we can expand a little more on that.
Cool. For those of you sending over questions through the chat, bear with us. I have a pretty decent backlog of questions that we're going through here. On a couple of questions here on zero config. The first one being, could you tell us the exact syntax order in which you assign zero configuration zero config in order to assign a phone updates and keys? This person is mentioning that sometimes the reboot will not happen with zero config and you have to go to the extension and reboot the phone there.
Okay, yeah, I've seen that, by the way, a long time ago in a very old firmware, especially with a particular phone. I believe it was the video phone, the Grandstream video phone. So first advice, obviously, you need to have the latest firmware on the phone and on the UCM. Sometimes your network, remember the way that the UCM is communicating with the phones and back and forth, we are using what we call a broadcast IP or method. Sometimes your network doesn't like the broadcast and may be dropping these packets. That's why it's going to interfere with that type of communication. So make sure that your switches are not dropping in the broadcast. And number two, make sure that you have the latest firmware on both devices.
Can you manually override p-values in zero config?
Yes, sometimes you may have an outdated firmware which it doesn't have the latest settings on a particular phone. So again, I mentioned that we have the model update. Let me show you quickly, where you can update the templates, right, from this menu right here. But if still, for some reason, Grandstream hasn't updated the particular setting, then yes, you can override the p-value by going to the zero config. Well, I don't have any phone detected. When you go to edit that phone, then you go to advanced, and then from advanced, you have an option that you can create a p-value. You need to know the p-value. Go to grandstream.com, go to support, and there's a section where you can download. Actually, I can show you right here. Tools. You go to tools, and you have all the templates. So, for example, if that particular p-value belongs to a GXP, I don't know, 2135, for example, right here. Go to configuration template. It's a zip file. We have all the template for any phone, and then find out the p-value, because in that template you have the name of the p-value.
Okay, next up. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So this is a good example, DP750. So in this template you can find out that, for example, special features. Now you know that the p-value for a special feature is P198, as an example. So then within the template, you can find the specific p-value that you're trying to change. And unfortunately, I don't have a phone connected to my demo unit. But typically when the phone shows up here, you go to the options, click the edit button, and then click advanced. That's where you can add a p-value.
Cool. All right, there was somebody asking about adding new ringtones to a phone, saying his goal is to emulate inbound call sounds versus, basically differentiate inbound calls versus internal calls, so they can tell which is which. And can this be done via zero config? It was noted that obviously we have a ringtone generator tool on our website, which you can download and then upload to the phone, which can be hosted the same where the firmware is. This person is noting that they have spent a good amount of time and could not get the tones to show up on the phone. They worked with one of our distributors and were finally able to get it, but weren't able to figure out exactly how they got it.
Okay.
And
yeah,
good.
That's a typical question, by the way, because we have most of our phones, they follow one system, and the Android phones, like the video phone, for example, those phones, they come already, because they're Android, they come already with many ringtones. But that phone is an exception. Now, the regular phones that we have, the GXP, for example, 1700, 1600, 2100, they come with 3 ringtones, 4 actually, default and ring 1, 2, and 3. Those are the only ringtone that the phone has. So if from the PBX, yes, incoming call, this is a good example. When you go here to the inbound route, you can say, all right, I want my incoming calls to have this particular ring pattern. So it's a little confusing, but we have up to 10 ringtones that apply to the Android phones. However, for the GXP phones, then we have the bell cores. Then DR1 is the default. Then you can select DR2 or DR3 or DR4. So you can play with these 3 ringtones only. Now, let's say you select number 3, and then incoming call with this DID will be sent to this extension. So extension 1005 is going to ring distinctively. Now, how about if you want to customize your ringtones? Yes, we have an option under the same tools section that you can customize your ringtones and then upload it to the phone. Right here. Customization guide. Ringtone generators. Okay, so you can have your own ringtone, but it's a binary file, so it needs to be a Grandstream binary file. You need to open this application, upload your ringtone, and then that application is gonna convert the file into a binary file, which you need to name it. There's a guide in that particular menu, by the way. So you need to name it with ring 1 or ring 2 or ring 3, and then put that file into the firmware server path, and then point the phone to your firmware server, and then the phone is gonna upload the ringtone. We added an option, by the way, not too long ago, that now you can upload the ringtones from the web UI. But again, the intention is to do everything from the UCM. He mentioned about zero config. If you want to use the predefined 3 ringtones, then that's how you do it from the inbound route. Okay.
Awesome. All right, looks like we got about 10 or 15 minutes left here, so we'll get through as many remaining questions as we can in that time. Does the UCM recognize fax tones? So if somebody, for example, were to send a fax to the wrong number, it would still receive it?
Yep. The UCM support a fax server, depending how you configure it. You may have your inbound calls that there's an option that you can say auto-detect fax tones for a, how do you call it, like a line that is used for both voice and fax. That's a good option. In case you have only one line, for example, a small office or small shop that they use one line only for fax and voice, then you can turn on that option. Then up on the sender fax machine start playing the fax tones, the UCM is going to recognize, it's going to interrupt the IVR, and then it's going to provide the fax tones.
For those of you saying that the question and answer did not work, you are correct. I do apologize for that. I'm not quite sure what happened, but we will check up on that afterwards. Can you explain what unmonitored means in terms of a VoIP trunk?
All right. He's referring to this option here. Unmonitored. So let's go to that zip trunk provider. It's test zip. Go here. All right, so the test, this is a zip trunk. And when you go to advanced settings, there is a setting, we call it heartbeat detection. It's not enabled. highly recommended. You need to check that. You need to enable it. What it's doing is that basically the UCM is sending sort of like a ping to that zip trunk or server every 60 seconds. So when the zip trunk provider is down, then the UCM knows already that that trunk is not available. So it's not going to waste time when someone is trying to dial. It's going to provide a prompt right away saying all circuits are busy or something like that. If you have a failover in place, then the UCM is not going to bother that zip trunk because it knows already that it's down. So it's going to send the calls to the failover trunk. If you don't have that option enabled, then the UCM is going to start sending the calls to that provider for a few seconds, maybe 2 or 3 seconds, and upon not responding or not receiving a response, then it's going to fail over or provide the prompt. And also, when you are monitoring or enabling, when you have the heartbeat enabled, when the trunk is down, you're going to be notified. Remember that event, you can enable or configure the event so you can receive emails upon this type of event.
All right, this question we've gotten a couple of times, and this is probably a good one to talk about. The question is our OpenVPN a server? Or basically, people noting in the older firmware it was a client, so did it change from a client to a server?
That's a good question. Let me confirm it for you. I believe we support now both client and server. Yeah, actually, server only. Yeah, it's in a roadmap, by the way, to create or include a client also. Typically, because this is a UCM, obviously you need to have the OpenVPN as the server, and then your remote phones they do support OpenVPN as the client. So, but currently it's OpenVPN server only.
All right, that answers that. A couple of questions about centralized phone books and kind of how to create those, how to configure them using either zero config or LDAP, or basically what's your advice on creating centralized phone books?
Well, UCM is doing it automatically for you. If you have all the phones connected within the same PBX in the same network, then all the extension, all the phone book that you create on each phone, they're going to be pushed automatically to the other phones. However, if you have a remote UCM, then you would like to share that phone book information to the other UCM. So then they can communicate the phone book for each branch, and then that information is going to be pushed to all the phones. In order to do that, first of all, you need to create or enable your LDAP server. I think the password is by default, which is admin. Then you go to the LDAP phone book, and then you can actually request or query a phone book from a remote LDAP server. So for the example that I'm giving right now, let's use the UCM phone book only. Then when you create your trunks, your zip trunk, you have an LDAP button right here. Well, I don't have it enabled, but let me enable LDAP on the settings. You go to advanced settings, go to the bottom, and what is LDAP right here. So you turn that on, then you enter the IP address. Then once you save it, well, let me see if I can save that. Then you have the LDAP sync button. So this UCM is going to sync up the LDAP every time that you press this button. We added in the latest firmware that that synchronization is happening automatically. There's a setting that you can configure that's going to happen every, once a day or once a week. So once the LDAP is synchronized, the phone books provided through the LDAP is going to be pushed automatically to the phones.
Cool. We're getting there. Is it possible to manipulate the calling number on inbound rules?
Yes, you can do that. There is a what we call strip and prepend option in your inbound route. You go to the bottom. My bad. That was for outbound route. For outbound, yes, we can manipulate that. For inbound, I know I've seen that. I have received the same question before. No, it's not supported at the moment. If you are interested in supporting that feature, please open a support ticket and give us more details why you need that, and probably we can include it in a future firmware.
Awesome. Is it possible to set up a situation where, for example, an employee would have to dial 9 to be able to make an outbound call?
Yeah, definitely. We support that option. Is to make it similar to the legacy PBXs. Yeah. So you can do that on the phone side. On the phones, they have a setting that says, I believe it's called something like outbound prepend for outbound calls, something like that. It's on the phone side, not on the PBX. So you enable that setting. You can once you enable it, you enter the number that you want to use, typically 0 or 9. So when the user presses the 9, he's going to hear a second dial tone. And then after that period, anything that he enters in the keypad, that's going to be sent to the UCM. So the UCM can connect it.
If the UCM, so just a general question about using the router mode on the UCM. If you could show, and maybe you did, and already where that's kind of set up and how you take advantage of that router mode feature.
Sure. All the UCM 6200 series, by the way, they all support router mode. And as I said before, not too long ago, we added support for IPv6. So in this menu, okay. Oh, I'm sorry. This particular UCM is a 6108, which doesn't support router. But in a conventional UCM 6200, then you have the typical setting as a router. You can convert it. You can use it as a router in a bridge mode or static IP. So again, this is not the correct PBX, but yes, this is the menu in a UCM 6200 where you have the router settings.
I know that we covered this earlier, but somebody's asking if it's possible to configure Grandstream phones basically to have multiple extensions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. One extension can be registered by multiple phones. You need to keep an eye that when you go to the extension menu, and then at the bottom you have an option that says concurrent registrations. Maximum is 10, so this extension 1000. If you increase that number to 5, for example, then you can have up to 5 phones registering to that extension number.
And obviously, you can also do multiple extensions on one phone, which you just showed us how to do.
Correct.
Yep.
Yes.
It looks like the last thing here that we'll cover or that I'll ask you about is a couple of questions about the WebRTC support. Somebody pointed out, and I believe this is correct, that it actually was not supported in the original firmware that it was supposed to be supported in. Is it supported now?
Yeah, it's supporting the latest firmware. I believe in the 14 or even the 13, we introduced WebRTC. He's right. We introduced WebRTC back in the firmware 10.x, I believe, about a year ago. Then we removed it, and then not too long in the 13 and up, we added that setting again, or that feature again. So yeah, basically you can have your browser click to dial. When you click an option in your browser, in your web page, sorry, you can configure your web server to connect to the UCM and dial an extension within the UCM, everything through WebRTC. So it's very NAT friendly, and anyone from their browsers can place a call to any extension behind the UCM.
Awesome. All right. That we're right up against it, 11:29 local time. So we will wrap up today's webinar. Before we do sign off, just want to kind of tell you about Grandstream Academy. Would you mind just maneuvering over to the homepage? So some of you may have noticed this through our social media posts or maybe some emails that you've got. We recently launched basically a more formal training and certification program that is called Grandstream Academy. Going forward, all of our in-person trainings all across the world you will be able to find out about those through this Grandstream Academy. Basically what we've done is we've taken the trainings we've already been doing and we've turned it into a formal program with formal certification levels. And actual, I believe it's 2-year ranges on when you get certified. You can use this system to take the training certification exams at the trainings you attend, as well as access a variety of other information. But as an end user or reseller, you'll mainly use this just to see and sign up for trainings. The login that you're seeing here is the staff login, I believe. So it might look a little bit different than what you see, but basically the 2 levels, you'll begin to see this, and our trainings will be, in-person trainings will begin to be incorporated with this. We have 2 main levels. We're going to have the Grandstream Certified Professional. That's more of we'll call it a basic sales marketing training. I don't know if sales and marketing is the right word, but basically the specialist level is you'll get certified basically to know what the device does, all the features that it has, and what those features do. Then you move up to the next level, which is Grandstream Certified Professional, which is what our full in-person trainings will allow you to achieve. So basically, if you've been to any of those in-person trainings in the past, that will allow you to become a Grandstream Certified Professional. And then we have a more basic level below that, Grandstream Certified Grandstream Certified Specialist. It's new to us here, so we're just getting used to it too. But check that out if you're, looking to get officially certified, to have an official certificate claiming you're certified, to be able to have a certification number and track that information and attend trainings and update your training certification. Head on over to academy.grandstream.com to sign up for an in-person or an upcoming training. This is something new that we just debuted recently. It really, frankly, doesn't change anything about the trainings that we're doing. It's just where you sign up for it, and now we give you the ability to actually have a specific certification level that you can track and update online. All right, so that's going to wrap up for today's webinar. Do appreciate everybody spending some time with us here today. Went through a lot over the last 2 hours. Thanks, Ernesto, for taking us through everything. And thank all of you for taking some time out of your busy schedules to be with us here. Know that as we approach the end of the year and the holiday season, it's a really busy time for everyone. So appreciate you guys taking some time out to be with us today. As I mentioned, this webinar was recorded. It will be posted, the full video and audio recording will be posted on our YouTube page, so check that out. I would check it tomorrow. Just head on over to YouTube, search Grandstream, or I believe the URL is youtube.com/Grandstream Networks. All right, so again, thanks for being with us here today. Hope to see you at another Grandstream webinar very soon, and have a great day.